What's going on, guys? So today I want to talk through the changes that we saw hit today. So all our nerfs and our buffs basically shifting and changing the meta up. I want to talk through some of the ones that I saw that look pretty decent. Some I didn't agree with as much. And then I want to discuss going forward what we can probably see as some of the top tier decks arising with the nerfs that we saw. And then touch on potential needs in the meta. So how can we make this meta with our new changes going forward, maybe new cards being released, how can we make it better and kind of improve upon upcoming meta? So that's my discussion that I want to talk through today. I figured you guys seemed to like my last video that talked about the meta changes and the nerfs upcoming. And I actually got really good. Like some of my predictions came exactly true. So I am really shocked with how dead on I was with my predictions. I don't know if they watched my video or what beforehand and were like, yeah, I like that. But some of these were spot on predictions. So props to myself. I don't usually do that, but I'm still kind of blown away how accurate some of my predictions came true. So we'll talk about that too as we go. I'll tell you which ones were really spot on. Actually, I'm going to go to my news feed here. We should be able to see the changes. So for those of you that haven't seen yet, we had 12 nerfs. So first up was barnstorming. I don't really agree with barnstorming nerf. I don't think it was needed. I mean, maybe they're going to release some cards in the future. Could be why on this card that they did that. But as the meta stands, I don't think it was necessarily needed to reduce that from 17 down to plus 15 until played. All right, what else do we have? So let's discuss our two big ones here, Bobbit Worm and Dark Web. Bobbit Worm reduced from 30 to 25 was my prediction, so I did get that one exactly right. And I think it was required. I think they did need to do that. Dark Web, I don't think got hit hard enough, is my first instinct here. And for reasons I talked about on my first video, if you guys watched that and watched my thoughts on Dark Web, I don't like that this card forces other decks that require core cards. Now I don't want to put those cards in my deck. So I might have a specific deck that requires I have these 3 specific cards that are over 50 in the deck. Well, now I'm already getting hurt. They're going to receive that plus 12 power permanently on all their cards over 50 just because I have to have these 3 cards in my deck. That's why I don't like this nerf here. I think they should have killed that maximum. Like I said in my previous video, just kill this maximum of whatever for your cards. They changed it down to 4 and then really reduce this power level down to, like I said, plus 2. I think it would really get around that hindrance for certain decks that now don't want to play. They don't want to play because of this Dark Web. So I don't think the nerf was quite enough. I think this plus 16 they can still get is pretty significant. And it's only on 4 cards, so you really got to think about what you put in your decks now. All right, moving forward, we did see Tiny get hit. I figured we would. I didn't know what, so I don't believe, I'm trying to recall if I said a nerf for Tiny. I don't think I did. I might have mentioned it, but I didn't call out a specific card, but I did anticipate one. Frilled Dragon looks like one of the cards along with Hygie that got hit. So I did expect to see that. At least one of them cards get hit. I didn't think it would be Hygie just because this card's so new. I thought maybe we'd see something on the lines of Binary or Cloning get hit, but that's okay. So just minor nerfs here. I think they just, like I said, they wanted to take it down so that high energy weeks, this deck isn't as viable. I did predict the Greek nerf, so I didn't think it would be this extreme, though. I think they hit it a little too hard, personally. They hit Cassandra and Hera, which is a pretty significant hit to Greek. So you're going to see Cassandra went from plus 20 to plus 16, and the Hera went from 6 turns to 5 turns. So pretty decent nerf there to 2 cards in their core cards that they need. So I think they're underselling how hard that one's going to hit right there. Door to Hell, I don't like this nerf at all. I think that was really unnecessary. I do agree that it is a staple card that people love to toss into decks, but I don't like that all they did was up the burn. I feel like that kind of sucks. I think what they should have just done is just, if they wanted to hit this card, reduce the plus power you gain, maybe take it down to 40 or 45. I think that would have sufficed. I don't like adding more burn to my cards in hand, because now if I get a bad turn where I'm forced to only play one card, maybe I'm up against a tax deck and, unknowingly up against a taxing deck, this is really going to hurt me into the next turn, right? Because all my cards, let's say I was only able to play one card that turn. Now 4 of my cards are hitting, minus 50 on that next turn. That's pretty backbreaking. So I don't agree with that one. I did predict a Shinigami nerf, which I think that was pretty obvious, right? I don't know that I like it. Now that there's no strategic play to it, it's just a random opponent's card's going to get hit. So to me, that really hurts this card a lot. Almost to the point I don't know if it's going to see much play anymore, to be honest. I mean, it's still strong, don't get me wrong, but not being able to try to decide which card you want to hit, that's pretty backbreaking with this. I think we might see a shift more towards the chronophotographic gun, because you can still place that card in front of. Maybe we see more death cards being played now, because you can strategically place those cards in front of your opponent's cards, which I think is what people like about this card. So changing that, I think, really kind of changed the whole card. Another card I predicted a nerf on was Hierophant, and this is one I almost got exactly right. I was only off by +2. I actually said I thought they needed to bring this down to +25 power, and they brought it down to +27. So pretty close on that one as well. World Turtle, I got exactly right. This is one I predicted that they should bring down to +14, and they did. So this is going to be one of my main talking points in the video, I think, when we get into the going forward potential for new decks. With this nerf to World Turtle, I think it opens up a lot of new avenues for players for some different decks, because this card was almost an auto-include, like I said before, being able to basically take the best cards from each archetype for this 4-4-4 meta, that it made it so easy and comboed so well with Planet X that's why it's almost all we saw in the meta. So knocking this down to that +14, I think, really opens up the door for better decks that have these higher plus power until played effects. So I'll discuss those here in a minute. Planet X, I think this was a great nerf. This might even have been a better nerf than what I suggested. Killing that second half from basically getting a permanent buff to now just an until played buff. I think that helps a lot. And I think the reduction could have been a little more on the permanent end, just getting that +14 from +15. But I guess it did kill, like I said, it did kill it on the second half. So it was getting the +30. Now it's only getting a +14 and then a +14 until played. So definitely a good size nerf there. I think that's going to help a lot. So I would agree with that one. That's pretty much it on the nerfs. The buffs, man, I even got close on a couple of these buffs, like Atlantis. I basically said they needed to add some plus power until played. I did say I wanted to see it on Philosophy. I think that would have been a neat way to make Philosophy a little more viable, but they did it on the card itself, which is fine. Cheetah I didn't mention. I didn't really foresee that one coming, but it makes sense. I like the Cheetah buff. Unicorn buff seemed a little unnecessary. Like I said, I think I would have rather have seen a Loch Ness buff, but I think that's fine too. I don't think that really changes much on that one. Camelot's a neat buff. I did predict that we would probably see some type of Arthurian buff. I think I went with King Arthur and Excalibur in my last video, but I could also see a case for Camelot being a buff, so I do like this buff. I think it does help out Arthurian legends quite a bit. And then the two randos down here that, I mean, don't get me wrong, this archetype needed a buff, but is this going to even be playable with these buffs is kind of my question now going forward. I still don't think it's playable. The Calamity Jane, Buffalo Bill. I haven't tried it yet, so I don't know for sure, but I'm going to say that it's probably still not going to be a playable archetype. So I just think that archetype needs a lot more help if they do want to see that as a playable archetype in the future, which it could. They might be releasing new cards that we don't know about. So there is potential there that we do see more on that archetype in the future. which is what I want to see if they're going to do these buffs like that. I do want more support for that theme in the future. So that's all the buffs. They did real lackluster, I think, on the buffs. I think they could have done a lot more. And like I said, on my previous video, I talk about some other buffs I would have liked to see. Specifically, like I think the main one would have been Loch Ness Monster. I really wanted to see a buff on that card. We did get one of them, though. We did get Atlantis buffed, so that is good. So now I want to switch gears and talk about the future of this meta. So I think with the big hit to World Turtle that we saw, that's going to make that not as viable as an archetype with this Planet X combo, which has been just running amok in the meta, right? That's why they did something about it. But I think what we will see arise now is Statue of Liberty. I think this is going to be the main card, the main go-to that takes the place of World Turtle. We're going to see these 6/6/6 decks, or 6/6 and something else, maybe swapping in, because I don't know if you guys seen some of my other videos. I've done Statue of Liberty with Eros to get a little more flexibility on that last slot. So instead of doing 6/6/6, we do 6/6/2/2/2, and that's been really effective for me. I've really enjoyed playing it. It really opens up that avenue to where I'm not losing the buff from Statue of Liberty by doing so. I'm getting the Eros buff of +20 instead. So basically really not losing a whole lot, but I'm getting that added flexibility of adding in other cards from other albums and still receiving a pretty comparable buff. So it's worked really well for me, for those of you guys that have saw some of my Eros decks recently. So I think we will see Statue of Liberty decks arise, and I think we will see Eros decks arise as probably now overthrowing these World Turtle decks. So keep an eye out on that. I also think we're going to see power per turn decks start getting up there now as well in the higher ranks. Reason being, with this Planet X nerf, this later game permanent power level that people were receiving on their cards, they're no longer getting as much of, right? So now we're going to be able to contend in the later game with these power per turn decks instead of just getting outclassed by these huge cards coming down late game, just 600, 700, 800 power turns. Now we're going to see these power per turn decks have a chance in the late game. So to combat this, and I'm going to switch gears a little bit here now into a meta need. I think because this late game is going to be so dominant by power per turns, I think they need an aggro type archetype to emerge. So what I mean by that is decks that, think of cards such as April Fools or Cranes. I'll actually go to so you guys can see what I'm talking about now. April Fools. So this card specifically, it hurts you after it's played, right? So it has great stats. 2 energy, you're going to get 100 base power. Fantastic, right? But once it's played, you're losing 80 permanently. So this is kind of what I'm thinking, is I would like to see these cards similar to, maybe not so extreme, but they hit really hard in the early rounds, give you a potential to win rounds 1, 2, and 3, and then basically forego the later rounds. So if you don't win those rounds 1, 2, and 3 right away, your late game is going to be a lot weaker, so your chances of winning now are gone. So essentially, aggro decks want to win right away, and I think that's what we need. There's not a lot of decks right now that do that I can think of offhand. Maybe a tiny deck would be maybe one type of deck, but even it kind of buffs itself as the game goes on, where I'm talking a deck that comes out fire and hot, and it gets weaker as the game goes on. I think that would be a really neat archetype that they should start promoting. Cards like April Fools that do it, you know. I think another one that comes to mind is, I want to say it's like 1,000 Cranes or something like that. Paper Cranes is another interesting one. It just makes it cheaper. So it is like a 1-drop essentially for 48, which is pretty strong. So cards like that are real cheap, that come out the gate hot, but have a lot of power right when they hit the table. I think that's what we need to see to combat these late game power per turn decks. Next deck I think we're going to see getting more play now is the self-lock archetype. People are going to look for alternative ways to gain this permanent power. So we're going to see cards like the Devil and Hanging Gardens now as alternative ways to get that power that we're not getting from Planet X, right? So like this card's going to give that plus 35 permanently. And there's easy ways to get this unlocked. So you're going to get this, you could get this multiple times in a game, easy peasy. And then with cards like the Devil, like I just mentioned as well, also providing another, I think it's plus 20 permanent buff to your cards in hand. There it is right there. So yeah, plus 20 on 4 random cards. So just other avenues in which to get that permanent power that they're no longer getting from Planet X. I would like to see, so we talked about Statue of Liberty's a plus 21 until played buff. We've got Eros, that's a plus 20 buff. We could see those two emerge. We could also see Tully monster decks arise, I would think, as well, as an alternative means for a plus 22 until played power. So, again, with only 14 coming from World Turtle, what's better? Would you rather have a plus 22? I think I would. So, I think this deck could be reigning supreme. So it is giving the most power that at least for a viable deck that I see that's until played. Other decks that could emerge, like I was saying before, Cyborg is a nice plus 20 until played, and it's easy to toss into a Statue of Liberty deck. So you could see a lot of Cyborg Statue of Liberty decks running around as top-tiered contenders. And finally, actually I got one more, actually two more. Hamilton. I think we could see some history decks running around. This is giving plus 18 until played. So for only 1 energy on those cheap energy weeks, I think this is a real contender. And finally, I think we're going to see a meta shift to Great Dying decks, looking again for other avenues for permanent power. So I think we're going to see this comboed with the high-hitting or heavy-hitting cephalopods coming in. So I think this could be a new viable deck as well, now that Planet X and World Turtle are no more. So yeah, I think that's about it for this video, guys. Hopefully that covered what I'm thinking. So like I said, I think the meta going forward, I think we need to see more aggro type cards to combat these late game decks. I'd also like to see, I just blanked. I'd like to see Robin Hood. We just saw Maid Marian drop as well, so I'm really hoping we get more Robin Hood support. I think this is a really fun, really neat archetype as well. If you haven't tried it, check it out. We are getting cards releasing for it, so I would like to see that. And just more of these different archetypes, right? Like reptiles, I'd like to see a buff on that. I think I mentioned that in my last video. So I think they could definitely add some support. Let's see, they got this card here. Gives plus 20 permanent power. We could even see Tremendous Trees arise. We do have some good. They didn't really take a significant hit, and they did get a couple other cards supported, like for the Chinese folklore. They have that buff. Blanking on the name of that card. Yeah, but anyways. That's what I think. I think that's how we're going to see the meta shake out. I think we're going to really see Statue of Liberty arise as probably the optimal choice. We're going to see power per turn decks arise as contenders for the late game. So going forward, I think they need to provide more aggressive, more aggro early game cards as a way to combat this meta. So that's my take on the meta. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and the content. And as always, thanks for watching. Hit that like button down in the bottom right, along with that subscribe button, please. And we will keep putting out content for you guys. All right, guys.